Hello, my name is Vicky and I'm 40 years old. Working was always my dream because I craved independence. And thank God I managed to get it for myself once I entered the working world. Being money savvy and always looking for ways to gain more income and rise on the economic fiscal ladder has been something ingrained in me from a young age. It has been such an important ideology in my household that my mother reaffirmed the importance of being financially stable and independent once I moved out of the house to pursue my dreams as a business analyst. When I first met my husband, Oliver, he was so sweet and kind. Unfortunately, though, I cannot say the same for my in-laws. Honestly, it's a miracle that we got married with all of the hatred I received from my sister-in-law, brother-in-law, and mother-in-law. Oliver and I have been married for 10 years. In that time, we've had our ups and downs as couples often do, but lately I've noticed him being a bit colder to me, and I have the suspicion that it's because several months ago, we both got some life-altering news. I remember the day like it was yesterday. Oliver found me in the kitchen just when I got home from work. I was beaming from ear to ear because I got the greatest news ever. Hey, babe. Hey, honey. Whoa, you sound happy. What's got my wife so chipper? Share the good news. Honestly, it's just so surreal. I'm not even sure if I can believe what just happened. Calm down. Don't keep me waiting any longer. Come on, spill the news. Okay, so I just got back from work. And I got a promotion. I started doing the happy dance. To explain further, Oliver and I, throughout our 10 years of marriage, as I'm sure most couples also do, have several inside jokes and behaviors that have come about due to sharing many intimate life experiences. One of those routines, practices, involves a happy dance that we do when we're excited and joyous. We developed this dance at the start of our relationship and we've been using it ever since. We did it at our graduation, at our engagement party, at our wedding, obviously, and when we found out we were pregnant, it was our little cute tradition that we'd always engage in. But for some reason, once I opened my eyes and was disillusioned from my giddiness, I saw that Oliver wasn't doing the happy dance. Confused and a bit sad, I asked, "Why aren't you doing the happy dance?" Oliver sighed. He sounded disgruntled and frustrated. "I'm happy for you, babe, but I also got some work-related news today. I got laid off." His head fell in sadness and what I can assume to be an embarrassment. The silence was deafening. It was so awkward you could cut through the tension in the room with a knife. I genuinely didn't know what to say. I felt awful for my husband, and I'm sure my elation at my good news was like pouring a bucket of salt into an already painful wound. "I'm so sorry, Oliver. This situation is devastating." "Yeah, well, I guess that's just part of life. There was nothing that they could do, so let's do something tonight. Let's go out to Chippy's. Some greasy fast food will make you feel better." Honestly, Vicky, I'm not really in the mood. Thanks for the offer, though. I think I want to be alone for some time. Congratulations, by the way. The days that followed were less awkward, but still uncomfortable nonetheless. I could feel a festering resentment grow between us. Now, it's not rocket science to suspect that Oliver was holding some jealousy and envy in his heart due to the circumstances, which is somewhat understandable because he was in a sensitive state at the time. I would like to point out that Oliver is quite a traditional man. He enjoys the thought of being the only breadwinner and coming home to a wife who was cooking and cleaning all day. Unfortunately, that's not going to fly in this economy. You'd have to be financially stable to actualize such a lifestyle, and unfortunately, we were not within our means to live that way, as we wanted to prioritize our children's education by putting them in private schools. Additionally, as I mentioned earlier, such a lifestyle doesn't really appeal to me. After all, I grew up living by the ideology that everyone should work for themselves and make a name for themselves and secure financial freedom. And with this new promotion of mine, I was well on my way to living a very comfortable life. Getting laid off obviously was still a very sore and sensitive subject, so when he would lounge around all day doing nothing, including not doing the housework, and watching documentaries and playing video games all day, I allowed it. A month had gone by and Oliver was still in his funk. He even got several visits from the aforementioned extended family in-laws of whom I wasn't very fond. But considering his sensitive state, I decided to put my pride to the side and allow the snarky and rude comments that were to be thrown at me, just so Oliver could receive some comfort and compassion from his family. "Oh, you poor thing! I hate seeing you like this, big bro." One day, all three of them, my sister-in-law, my brother-in-law, and my mother-in-law, visited at the same time, which made me quite uncomfortable and a bit panicked because it meant that I would be receiving not twice, but thrice the amount of negativity permeating my home. "Honestly, I'm so baffled that you got laid off. If anything, I thought that Vicky would be the one losing her job before you ever would. This is so shocking." Come to think of it, women nowadays are more likely to be laid off, right? I mean, makes sense since they'd be at home taking care of the kids and the home, so why would you, of all people, get laid off? Before I could even rebuke Benjamin's stupid ideology, my obnoxiously loud mother-in-law burst in from the kitchen, carrying a tray with some food and drinks to serve her ailing son. I swear you'd think he broke every bone in his whole body with the amount of pampering and coddling he was receiving. "It's such a shame that this has happened. My poor baby. I could just cry. I'm so upset." "It's been tough. I'm not going to die. At least Vicky has been here to support us while everything has been going down." A wife and mother supporting her husband? What has this world gone to? Oh, so that's where Oliver got his outdated philosophies from. "Vicky, I think you should prepare dinner for all of us. We're going to be here for a while." My breath hitched. I had just come home from a very exhausting day at work in which I had to stay for an extra 4 hours to appease my boss. I didn't want to give him the impression that I'd gotten too comfortable, lax, after receiving the promotion, as this could risk possibly getting demoted, or even worse, fired. Having 2 unemployed people in the house was the last thing we needed, so I always did my best to ensure that I was always on top of my game. Unfortunately, this meant that oftentimes I would come home very exhausted, and most days I'd have to cook the meals because Oliver was feeling depressed and would depend on me to satisfy him. Sometimes on particularly hectic days at work, I would like to come home and eat something that had already been prepared for me. So I would ask Oliver very kindly and sensitively, as to not make him upset, if he could prepare dinner for me when I was approximately an hour from finishing work, so that once I got home, I could eat a meal and go to bed and begin the slave work tomorrow, at least in better spirits. He would oftentimes refuse, and as much as I was irritated, I would let it slide. But sometimes I wouldn't let it slide, and I'd plead with him, and in those moments he would begrudgingly make dinner, and he would always make it in poor quality, which is surprising because before the news of his being laid off, he was the better cook between the both of us. Needless to say, I was not in the mood to cook, especially for such a large group of people, as I was always used to making dinner for 2, since it was just Oliver and me in the household. Thank God my kids were staying with friends, and so we didn't need to worry too much about prepping dinner for them as well. Actually, I'm feeling quite sore and tired from working recently. Is it okay if we order some food instead? I know a great restaurant that serves great pasta. My sister-in-law and mother-in-law gasped quite dramatically, and my brother-in-law just shook his head. Oliver remained unresponsive. "How dare you, Vicky? Honestly, I'm so disgusted right now. We're your guests. I mean, we barely come over here because you never invite us, and this is how you treat us? My mother just asked for a nice home-cooked meal. The least you could do is serve us." "Yes, sis. I gotta say, I'm a bit disappointed that you'd say something like that. It doesn't have to be a 7-course meal. Plus, I'm not in the mood for pasta." I swear to God, this younger generation is poisoning even us adults. How could you even ask such a question, Vicky? We get it. You're employed and you're very busy and you're tired, but can't you see your husband is upset? Can't you do this one thing for him? You're his wife, for God's sakes. You're supposed to do the cooking anyways. I was so overwhelmed by all of the barking and yelling that to try and de-escalate the situation, I said this. Look, I get that you guys feel that you are guests, even though you're quite literally family and not random strangers. I'm trying to impress. But anyways, as I mentioned before, I am quite tired. But since you all feel so strongly about it, I will make the dinner, and I apologize for making that suggestion. Please bear with me. Making dinner might take some time because I'm just so exhausted, but I will do it. As I got up to go and make the wretched dinner for my ungrateful in-laws, I heard Oliver speak up in what seemed to be a while, and what he said, honestly, shocked me. She's been forcing me to make dinner. As if the dramatic gasp I heard moments ago wasn't enough, I swear, even with my back turned, I sensed both my mother-in-law and sister-in-law clutching their pearls as they let out an even larger gasp than before. And surely enough, when I turned around, my spidey senses turned out to be correct. Additionally, Benjamin, in addition to shaking his head even more vigorously this time, had a visible look of disgust that was pointed towards me. She did what? Are you out of your mind, Vicky? How selfish could you be? Maybe I'm the bad guy in this story. No? Well, I'll tell you, at that moment it certainly started to feel that way. I was attacked for several minutes by some very angry in-laws who called me selfish and evil for forcing my husband to make dinner every once in a while. Might I add, it wasn't like I made him do it every day. On the days when I was particularly extremely exhausted and on the verge of passing out on the couch. I'm sorry, Vicky. I'm not trying to make you look bad, but I just think it's unfair for you to burden me with household labor as if I'm the wife in this situation. I mean, the roles are supposed to be swapped, if I'm being honest. It's just not fair. I noted the crack in his voice towards the end of his monologue, and immediately I softened. My poor husband was indeed going through a lot of angst and turmoil. I know depression is a real thing. I know people can't get out of bed most days, and maybe he was just so debilitated that he couldn't do anything. So I just decided to bite my tongue and lend a compassionate ear to the situation. I'm so sorry, Oliver. I am. Okay, from now on, you don't have to make dinner. I'll do everything. I went into the kitchen and made dinner. Once it was ready and served, I ate in silence as Oliver, Hannah, Benjamin, and Lillian ate and chatted the night away. They appeared to have a grand old time, not once involving me in the conversation or even asking if I was okay, since I was mute ever since the embarrassing and frankly quite unfair argument that took place. I guess they still believed that I was the one at fault for everything. I was mostly upset with what Oliver said. I was used to my in-laws treating me that way, but Oliver? Honestly, I was very surprised. Nonetheless, I let my pride go, and after that day, I was the only one cooking and cleaning, which added to my stress and exhaustion. Another month went by, and I was continuing to hold down the fort. Being the sole provider was quite all right in this circumstance, since my promotion came with a bonus and a slight pay increase, but I knew that it couldn't be like this forever. Regardless of my growing worry, I let Oliver continue to revel in his miserableness a bit because, well, I felt like he was allowed to feel upset about the whole ordeal. Thank God we were fortunate enough that he had the privilege of laying around the house and nursing his broken heart, as other people in desperate financial situations don't have the luxury of moping around all day. Some people need to start looking for work immediately after being laid off, fired, because they don't have the financial security to sustain themselves and their families. This went on for an additional 2 months, and I noticed the household funds steadily decreasing. As much as I initially thought that I'd be able to sustain the household for some time, I started to notice that this couldn't be kept up for long. And if we wanted to keep our daughters in private school, Oliver needed to get a job ASAP. I sat down one day and informed him of this. Oliver had now been speaking to me very brashly and curtly, giving me attitude like a disgruntled child after not getting what they want. I think it's time you start looking for work. Our lives can't be sustained if we keep spending like this, but only relying on one source of income. But I thought you have a job, and you got a promotion, remember? Do you remember how you're making more money than me because I'm jobless? Yes, Oliver, I understand you're still hurting. But we need to consider this. Consider our daughters. Private school is very expensive. Don't you think I know that? God, you can be so stupid at times. His voice began to soften once he saw my eyes turning red and my face turning puffy. I was just so exhausted from everything. I was tired of throwing this man a pity party, and it was emotionally tolling me as well. Hey, look, don't cry now. I'm sorry, Vicky. You know I've been feeling stressed because of this situation. I know that, babe, but we need to do something, or else our children will suffer. You're right. I'll start looking tomorrow. Actually, you don't need to start looking for anything because I think I might be able to get you a job at my workplace. Yes, folks, you heard that right. I was the one who got him the job at my workplace because I was networking with people and working so diligently, as well as getting into good favor with my new boss. I managed to pull some strings to see if Oliver could work with me. We both worked in the same field, but opted to work in different companies just so that we avoided adding a new dynamic of potential stress that could ruin our relationship. We both liked the idea of working separately as it promoted our individuality as people and not as husband and wife. But considering our circumstances, I saw that there was much little choice. And at the time I thought, how bad could it be? Quite bad, it turns out, as what I'm about to tell you will shock you. A few more months had gone by and Oliver was making great progress in the company, but what he told me after working there for only a couple of months almost made my jaw hit the floor. So, babe, I just wanted to let you know that I've invited Mom, Hannah, and Ben over for dinner as I have very important news I need to share with everyone. Please, could you make dinner and ensure that it's going to be good because this news is very exciting. Oliver began to do the happy dance, and I joined in, celebrating with him even though I didn't know what was going on. I prepared the dinner as was instructed and welcomed the guests into our home once they arrived. As some small talk was made during the onset of dinner, Oliver interrupted all the mini conversations. As you know, I've gathered you all here today to share some very exciting news. I would like to let you know that... Drum roll, please. Benjamin and Hannah abruptly drummed their hands on the table. We were all on the edges of our seats as we awaited the news. I got a promotion! Everyone immediately burst with joy and excitement, dancing around the table and celebrating this accomplishment. I'll admit, I was a bit surprised that he got a promotion so quickly, despite barely being here for a year, but I was too excited at the time to care. I was just so happy. He finally appeared to be out of his funk. He even looked better, like he was taking better care of himself, and that's all that mattered. Hold on, everyone. I don't think Oliver is finished with his news. Go on, Ollie, tell them the rest. A little bit of hesitation cropped up when he said, Vicky, here you go. He handed me what appeared to be a hotel key card. I was confused, but then I got an idea. Oh, babe, did you get us a hotel room to celebrate? How thoughtful of you. This is nice. Honestly, I think I needed something like this. I've been so stressed and exhausted. No, it's not a hotel room for us. It's a hotel room for you. I was obviously confused, and at that moment, I noted that the rest of the in-laws weren't confused as well. If anything, they looked somewhat pleased, as if they had accomplished arranging all the dominoes in place and were waiting for the last domino to fall. I'm confused. What's going on? So Oliver had approached us some time ago, and he told us all about his new job and how he was thriving, and we, mainly Hannah. Yes, I suggested because of his upcoming success and the increased bonuses he's been receiving, he should contemplate his life choices and decisions because we really didn't like what you said all those months ago when we came here last time. What are you talking about, Hannah? Well, we just suggested and subsequently concluded that you two needed to go on a break because we feel like you've been abusing him and he deserves some peace for the time being, especially since he's making good money now. He no longer needs to depend on you as much. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Never in my life has my heart felt so much pain and my mind felt so much confusion. I was completely at a loss for words. This man, my husband, the person I've been married to for the past 10 years, has decided to treat me like this? All because his sick and evil family so badly wants to make my life miserable? I looked at Oliver with a face so full of hatred and rage that it made him bow his head in disappointment. Whoa, okay, let me clear the air. It didn't exactly go like that. We just thought that you two need some space from each other because we know that you've both been going through some stress. And since Oliver is now the breadwinner, we thought it made the most sense to put you in a hotel for the time being. So you're kicking me out? You're kicking me out of my own house, the house that we paid for together? Oh, don't start that equal rights nonsense, Vicky. You know that your husband is the head of the house. It doesn't matter if you paid for it together. He's still the head of the household, and he still makes the decisions. Here, I'll help you pack your bags. He needs to be in his own space right now and appreciate the lifestyle he has created for himself. I was livid. I saw red. I simply couldn't understand how people got the gall to treat other people this way. I knew my in-laws hated me, but I didn't know the extent of their anger, and that night as I tried not to cry and yell and scream and, frankly, set the house on fire, I saw the amusement painted all over my in-laws' faces, with my husband looking somewhat sheepish and only ever so slightly embarrassed, as if he made a silly mistake on an exam and not just broken his wife's heart. I stomped up to my room without saying a word, packed a bag of my belongings, and drove to my best friend's house to stay the night. I spent the whole night sobbing and wondering what I did to deserve this treatment. Because of my go-getter attitude and hard-headedness, my sadness quickly turned to anger. And that anger turned into me plotting for my revenge. Despite being exhausted and drained from months of breaking my back and dealing with emotional abuse, I somehow found the energy to do some digging regarding how quickly my husband got these apparent bonuses that I knew nothing about. I decided to call in sick the next day so that I could do some digging. Once my husband was out of the house, I returned home to do some investigative work. Because we worked at the same company, I knew his working hours and I acted accordingly. Once I arrived home, I went straight to his office to start my sleuthing. After a couple of hours, I found some shocking evidence. It turns out that he had been embezzling money from the company. He had somehow found a way to be siphoning funds from the company, and not only that, he was in cahoots with the new boss that I mentioned earlier. I stared at his computer screen for a solid 10 minutes, simply refusing to believe what my eyes were telling me. His connections with the boss are probably what enabled him to get away with his actions. I gathered as much information as I could into a pen drive. I collected all of the emails, documents, and other information and inconsistencies in the company's spending that could be used against him. I then went to my room and collected some more of my things, a significant number of things, because I knew that I would not be back, not for a long while at least. Once I got back to my best friend's house, I began to compile all of the information into a PowerPoint presentation because I was about to ruin this man's life. Once I was finished, I emailed my boss and attached several other emails, especially individuals who were higher-ups and those associated with HR, to inform them that there is some important news that needs to be shared, and an emergency meeting needs to take place ASAP to discuss the discoveries I made. I made the email vague but interesting enough so that they'd allow an emergency email to be held on such short notice. In a separate email, I emailed my husband and told him that there was an emergency meeting he needed to attend concerning some plans for the upcoming fiscal year. Both my superiors and my husband aptly responded, and thankfully they were all available to be in the meeting. The next day came about, and I was very giddy and excited about what was about to go down. I ensured to wear my best suit and look my absolute best for what was about to happen, as it was going to be completely iconic and legendary. I made my way to the meeting room, seeing that most of the individuals were already seated. All that was left was my slimy husband and my slimy boss. They came in, and for a brief moment they looked somewhat panicked, as they noticed that a lot of important people were in the room. Perhaps it was their guilty conscience telling them of their misdeeds. Anyways, I began the meeting. I laid out all of the information and presented it so clearly, adding more heat as the presentation went on. Everyone in the room was completely astonished, and my boss and Oliver turned red and began to panic, as everyone's eyes were turned on them in hatred and disgust. One of my superiors even said that they'd rot in jail for all of their embezzling. At one point, Oliver was sending me daggers through his eyes, but I returned the same look of hatred and disgust and began to twist the knife even more, getting him where it hurts. He stood up. "Just what do you think you're doing, you wretched little gremlin? She's lying to everyone. Don't believe a word she says. I'll sue you for slander. I'll sue you and get a divorce, and I'll ruin you." The husband I married all those years ago was completely gone. What was standing right in front of me right now was a full-blown monster. He attempted to leave, but luckily I secretly called for security in advance to be stationed at the door because I had informed them of the information I found. Oliver was embarrassed when he was greeted by two burly men standing at the door, preventing his escape. My slimy boss, who was in on all of the illegal activities, began to sob, muttering about how his life is ruined, while Oliver continued to embarrass himself by trying to push past the big strong men. I spent a good 30 minutes relaying to everyone all of the information I found, and once I was finished, both men looked defeated. You can probably imagine what came next. Well, just in case you can't, both Oliver and my boss were promptly fired and charged with embezzling the company's funds for their selfish gain. They were escorted out of the premises, but not without being swarmed by a media frenzy. Oh, did I forget to mention that I also contacted news outlets and tabloids to be ready to catch the looks of horror and embarrassment plastered all over Oliver's face? Well, I did, and it felt so good. Seeing his face plastered all over the front page of the local newspaper the next morning made me feel happy. He deserved it after the way he treated me. He's currently in jail trying to make bail, but there's also been some investigations and assumptions that Benjamin, my brother-in-law, might have also been part of the scheme. With this newfound information, I had to get some more, and so I discovered that Benjamin, who works in IT, was indeed helping Oliver and my boss with all of the embezzling. To add insult to injury, it appears as though my mother-in-law and sister-in-law were all also part of the scheme. It was now all coming together and making sense. That's the reason why my in-laws and husband kicked me out of the house. They were trying to get rid of me so that they can continue in their criminal ways. So far, there have been speculations that Benjamin will join Oliver in prison, and I'm sure that my mother-in-law and sister-in-law are panicking because they are also going to be found out soon. These past couple of months have been the craziest of my life, but I am so grateful that I managed to discover this harrowing information in good time before things could get worse. I think it goes without saying that my good deeds did not go unnoticed. Not only did I expose my awful husband and his awful family, but I was also approached by my superiors. They reviewed my work file and all of my accolades and achievements and decided to promote me. Not only did they promote me, but they made me take my old boss's position. I start work next week. The new position comes with an even bigger bonus as well as an even higher pay raise. I am so excited to begin. And yes, I am beginning to process the divorce papers because I'm obviously not going to be associated with a man who's a criminal. I imagine that getting custody of the kids will be easy on my part. For one, I am their mother. I'm also making a lot of money, and I am not a criminal who embezzles funds and abuses the trust and care of other people. I am so excited and happy about this new journey that I'm about to embark on. I think everyone in the end got what they deserved. Hey, Eric. Mommy, you're back. Yay! Where's Daddy? Eric got uncomfortable with this question. He looked down and said, I don't know. What's going on, love? You're keeping secrets with Mommy? Eric did not say anything, but he kept looking down at the floor anxiously. I sensed that something was wrong. I called up my husband. David, where are you? I came for a vacation with our son. I hung up the call. We immediately packed the bags and left the house. Hello, my name is Caroline and I'm 40 years old. I'm married to David, who's 42 years old. We've been married for the last 10 years. I and David used to work at the same office. That's how we know each other. We fell in love with each other and got married. We were a happy couple. After 2 years of our marriage, our son Eric was born and our family seemed complete. Eric is now 8 years old. Soon after our marriage, David got a better opportunity from a different company and he switched to a different company. I continued to work in the same company and now I'm in a senior position and I have to travel for a few days a month for business trips. When my son Eric was 3 years old, I was offered a promotion at work with the clause that I would have to travel for business purposes for a few days a month. I was reluctant to accept as Eric was too small to be left alone, but David supported me. Don't worry, honey. I'll take care of Eric. Are you sure? Eric is too small. Absolutely. He's my son, too. Besides, it's just a matter of a few days. Okay, then, I'll accept the promotion. David was always supportive of my work. He used to take care of Eric when I went on these trips. I was so grateful to David for being so caring and supportive. Our life was pretty smooth until one day, my father-in-law called. Hey, David, I was thinking of stepping down from the business. I could no longer take on the stress of business. All okay, Dad? Yeah, everything's fine, just that I'm getting older, It's time for you to take over the business. David replied politely, Dad, you know I have worked hard to make my identity. Now, you just want me to leave everything and join your business? David, you knew this was coming. I've let you do everything you wanted until now, but this is one thing which you should do for the family. Dad, you can't force me. I'm not forcing you. Think about it. How long would you work at the job? The business will give you the flexibility to enjoy the later part of your life. But Dad, you are my only heir. If you refuse to run the company, then I'll have to sell it off as I can't manage it anymore. I didn't mean that. Okay, then wind up your work in a month and join the business. But Dad, you've run the business so efficiently for so many years, I'm afraid I'll not be able to manage so well. You would learn as you run it. I too didn't know anything about business until I started doing it on my own. Okay, Dad, I'll give the notice to my company and wrap up my work there. Although David was happy at his job, he knew that he would have to take over the family business at some point. So he was prepared for this, just that he did not realize that this would happen so soon. Soon after David joined his family business, I noticed a gradual change in his attitude. He would come home late, spend the evenings all by himself on his phone, and was mostly away on the weekends. This continued for a few months. After a while, I could not take it any longer and decided to confront him. David, is everything fine with you? Yes. What happened? I've been noticing a change in your attitude for the last few months. Change? What are you even talking about? I wanted to have this conversation with him so that we could fix it, but he simply ignored that anything was wrong. I got furious at his ignorance. Don't act as if you don't know what I'm talking about. You come home late almost every day. Some days when you're early, instead of spending time with me or Eric, you are busy on your phone. David replied in a stern voice. This is happening because I'm busy. I no longer work for a company where I can wrap up my work at 7 p.m. It is my business now. I have to give time to it. Even after coming home, I have to coordinate with other departments over the phone. What about the weekends? Yes, sometimes we have work on weekends too. I didn't know what to say, hence I went out of the room to calm down. Although David's reasons were legitimate, I still wasn't convinced. I could feel the coldness growing between us, which I just could not explain to David. I decided to give him the benefit of doubt and give him some time to settle into the business. Besides, David was a caring father to Eric and would take care of him while I was away. He used to take his time off and take Eric for small vacations when I was on the business trips. 2 years passed. David got busier with his business, and now he sometimes does not come home at all. Although we lived under the same roof, we barely spoke to each other. I kept wondering to myself if my work was the reason behind our growing distance. Sometimes I felt too lonely. I had no one to discuss my problems with. My parents were in their late 70s, so I didn't want to stress them out with my problems. I lost touch with most of my friends as I got busy with my family and work. David's presence in my life was almost negligible. My only hope was my son, Eric. Although he was too young to understand my problem, yet spending time with him makes me happy and relieved. It kept me going. But recently, I observed that Eric was distracted. His grades were falling in the monthly tests, and he was spending way too much time on video games. David has been pampering Eric a lot with all kinds of video games, automatic car toys and whatnot. The next time when David brought expensive video games for him, I resisted. David, Eric already has a lot of video games and toys. This new one is unnecessary. What do you mean? Now I can't give gifts for my son? What do you want? Eric's grades have been falling and he is too distracted these days. He is always on video games, which is not good for his mental growth. He is my son. He would find a way for himself. You don't need to worry about him. Well, he is my son too. I need to ensure that he's raised to be an educated and responsible person. Are you trying to taunt me that I'm an irresponsible person? I have been taking care of Eric since he was 3 years old, when you left him at home for your business trips. I was shocked at his words. It was he who volunteered to take care of Eric. Besides, he is the father of Eric, so he has the responsibility too. Wasn't it you who asked me to take the promotion and you volunteered to take care of Eric? Yes, it was me. You should be grateful to me for supporting you, but all you do is just complain. I have always been grateful to you for supporting me. That's the reason I'm still with you in this house, despite your cold behavior towards me. Saying this, I broke down. Oh, please, don't try to play the victim in front of me. I lost my patience and shouted at him. You know what? I'm done with you. I no longer have any affection or gratitude for you. Whatever you have done for taking care of Eric, it was your duty as a parent. I don't owe you anything for this. David, too, yelled back at me. You're such an ungrateful woman. Women like you can never be happy, and neither keep their husbands happy. David had never raised his voice at me like this. Even if we were not talking properly, he was never mean to me. He was a changed man now. These words pierced my heart like a knife, and I was howling in pain. I locked myself up in the bathroom and cried my heart out. Eric overheard the fight between David and me. He saw me locking myself in the bathroom, and when I didn't come out after a long time, he started knocking on the door. Mommy, come out! I heard him crying outside the bathroom. I washed my face, came out, and hugged him. Mommy, I was afraid when you locked yourself for so long. My bad, honey. I was taking a bath. But your hair is still dry. I cracked up and pulled his cheeks. Aren't you too smart for your age? Do you want to have some spaghetti for dinner? Eric got excited on hearing this. Yeah, spaghetti. Seeing his smile, I forgot all my pain. All this while, David was lying down on the couch, busy on his phone. I made dinner, fed Eric, and put him to sleep. I had a flight for my business trip the next morning, so I packed my bags and slipped a note of my travel details to David on his study table. Ever since our relationship got cold, I slip a note of my travel details on David's study table so that he makes himself available for Eric or drops him at my in-laws' house. The next morning, I went for my scheduled trip. However, the recent confrontations with David just kept me haunted. I was not able to concentrate on the work. It was a 3-day trip, but on the second day, I started feeling feverish and weak. So I decided to shorten the trip. I called up my manager and told him that I felt sick. He coordinated with the travel department and scheduled my return flight immediately on the same day. I returned home thinking of having a good time with my son. I saw that the main door of the house was locked and the lights were also off. I unlocked the door with the duplicate key and went inside. The living room was dark. I switched on the lights and went upstairs to Eric's room. I saw Eric playing with his video games, lying on his bed. "Hey Eric, my love, what are you doing here? And why all the lights in the house are switched off?" Seeing me, he got excited and ran toward me. "Mommy, you're back! Yay! Where's Daddy?" Eric got uncomfortable with this question. He looked down and said, I don't know." "When did he leave the house?" "I don't know, Mommy. Dad asked me not to tell you anything." "What do you mean, honey?" "What's going on, Eric? You're hiding secrets from Mommy." Eric did not say anything, but he kept looking down at the floor anxiously. I sensed that something was wrong. I called up my husband. "David, where are you?" "I came for a vacation with our son." I was shocked. David was lying. That was the last nail in the coffin. The phone was on speaker. Eric, too, heard everything. I hung up the call. I stared at him and he started sobbing. After this, Eric told me everything. It was so horrible to hear. "Mommy, whenever you used to go for a trip, Daddy left me alone in the house." "What?" He was still sobbing. I sat him down on my lap and hugged him. "Sweetheart, since when Daddy's leaving you alone?" "When I was small, Daddy took care of me, never left me alone. But now he locks me inside the house. He keeps the food in the fridge for me to eat and gave me video games to play." "When does your father come?" "Daddy comes late in the night and again goes out in the morning." I could not believe what my little son was going through while I was away. I blame myself too for leaving him at David's disposal. "Honey, why didn't you tell me?" "First, Dad used to leave me for a few hours, but he brought a lot of chocolates and toys for me. But now he is away for the whole day. Dad asked me to promise that I won't tell you anything." I could not see him crying like this. "Okay, calm down now. Mommy's here." "I'm sorry, Mommy. Dad got me the latest video games. I kept my promise and didn't tell you anything." "I'm sorry, baby, that you had to go through so much." I could not believe my ears. What kind of father would do that? David was rewarding Eric for hiding this secret. I felt disgusted. I could no longer stay in that house or let my child see that horrible man. We immediately packed the bags and left the house. I hired an investigating agency to investigate David. After dropping Eric to my aunt's place, I went to David's parents and narrated the entire incident. My mother-in-law could not believe that David could do such things. "Caroline, don't get me wrong. Perhaps there can be some misunderstanding. It is not wise to take such a big decision on Eric's words. He is a small kid." "What do you mean?" "I understand what you're going through, but you can once talk to David if there's another part of the story." Although her intention was not bad, she was just advising me to have a confrontation with David before taking any decision. But at that moment, I was too furious to understand her intention. "Do you think that Eric is making up all these things? If David was not wrong, why did he lie to me that he was on a vacation with Eric?" Well, he might have been busy with work. I lost my patience and told them everything. This is not the only incident. Your son has been giving me the cold shoulder since he joined the business. He comes late at home, barely spends time with Eric, and spends his weekends away from home. Are you trying to say that all these are happening because David joined his family's business? My father-in-law interrupted. Brianna, stop. Caroline is right. I never thought David would turn out to be like this. After he joined the business, a few of my senior employees gave me a hint of David's growing closeness with his assistant. What? Why didn't you tell me about this? I brushed it away as gossip. People tend to enjoy these types of gossip at work. I thought David was too mature to have an affair. He loved you and Eric so much. I should have taken it seriously. I regret it now. Please forgive me, Caroline. I sat there numb. I didn't say anything. Brianna was shocked too. They both were devastated. David had a reputation as an ideal son, ideal husband, and ideal father. He has disappointed everyone. I was not angry with my father-in-law because I too never doubted David of having an affair, despite things getting colder between us. I thought that we have fallen out of love because of our working schedules. I was so naive to think that when Eric grows up, me and David would be relieved from our parental duties and work commitments. Then we'll spend our retirement days again happily together. After I left my in-laws' house, I started getting calls from David. Probably my in-laws called and confronted him. I ignored his calls and blocked him. I moved in with my aunt for a few days and started looking for a house. After a few days, the investigating agency sent the reports, and it was true. David was having an affair with his assistant, Lily. He used to skip his office and spend all day at her place when I was away for a trip. I hired a lawyer and sent the divorce papers along with the copy of photo evidence I got from the agency. Lily was a single mother of a 5-year-old girl. She was divorced by her ex-husband on the charges of an extramarital affair when she was pregnant. While applying for the job, Lily played a victim card and told that she divorced her husband because he was cheating on her while she was pregnant. Seeing her helplessness as a single mother, my father-in-law gave her a job despite her low qualifications. She lied to everyone at the office to get sympathy. Probably she said the same story to David, but her true color was revealed by the investigation agency. The agency fetched the details of her ex-husband too. Lily was divorced by her ex-husband without any alimony or child support because her husband alleged that the baby was not his. The DNA report also proved the same. I sent all these details to David through my lawyer. My lawyer told me that David was devastated to see those details, and he broke up with her. He accused Lily of breaking into our house. David was not ready to divorce me. He loved Eric and couldn't lose him. He told the lawyer that he got influenced by Lily and pleaded for a second chance. He also admitted that it was Lily's idea to lock Eric at home because her daughter stays alone at home when Lily goes to work. I might have given him another chance if it was just me who was hurt, but now it is the question of my child's safety and upbringing. I can't raise Eric with a father who bribes his son for lying. After suffering for so long, I was adamant to get a divorce. It wasn't a matter of a few days or months. David cheated on me for so many years, yet I never doubted his loyalty. I could never forgive him for breaking my trust. I did not agree to any settlement but divorce. My father-in-law apologized for David's mistakes and stood by my side all this while. Everyone at the office knew and gossiped about David's affair and the divorce. My father-in-law could not take this shame and threw out David and Lily from the company. He ran the company again for a few years before selling it off to another businessman for a hefty amount. He has cut off David's name from his will and instead gave his inheritance to Eric. David was disowned by his parents as he had broken their trust too. David shifted to the other side of the city as everyone in the neighborhood looked down upon him for cheating on me with his assistant. Meanwhile, I took a transfer to a different department where I didn't have to travel. Now, I can manage my house and work efficiently. I've hired a full-time nanny to take care of Eric. I'm planning to quit my job in a few years as I have saved enough for my retirement. I want to enjoy my life to the fullest with my son. I wish Eric grows up to be an educated and responsible person. Hello, my name's Harper and I'm 34 years old. I have always been taught and told that as a woman, my place is in the kitchen and the home. Despite this, I will do my best to make a name for myself to avoid being exploited, and that's exactly what I did when my evil husband and mother-in-law conspired to work against me and bring me to my downfall. It all started when I noticed that both my husband and my mother-in-law would make household decisions without my consent and my knowledge. Babe, why am I finding all these plans on expanding the house? When were you going to tell me that this is something you wanted to do? I didn't see any need to tell you since I'm the one making the most money in this house, so I can do what I want. Okay, but I'm your wife. We have to talk about things like this. Get off my back, woman. I don't really know when my sweet Jake turned so sour, but at some point he did, and he's completely unrecognizable at this point. He hates me for some reason, and I just don't know why. I tried to be kind to counteract the anger I would constantly receive, but as the years went by, he appeared to be getting worse. Okay, if you want to renovate the house, that's fine. I won't stand in your way. But as your wife, I would like to be a bit more involved in household decisions. Why? I already tell my mom everything, so I don't know why you're so obsessed with wanting to know every single thing. Yeah, and why is that? Why do you always turn to your mother when it comes to decisions that are to do with us? Is she part of this marriage too? I told you to get off my back. Don't make me repeat myself, and don't make me do anything I'll regret. This is how our conversations would go nowadays, just constant arguing and fighting. And it was taking a toll on me, my children, my family members, and my friends. They all constantly told me to get a divorce and leave him, but I was too loyal. I couldn't bear the thought of no longer being with him. That was until my mother-in-law started to become more involved in our lives, and all the dots began to connect. You see, I found out that my mother-in-law and my husband were doing some very unsavory and shady things, and this is how I found out about everything. My mother-in-law would make bi-weekly visits, which were increasing in frequency and length. Before, she would only come once a month, and it slowly but steadily grew into more and more visits, which would be fine had she not been such an insane person. Oh, well, if it isn't my favorite daughter-in-law. I'm your only daughter-in-law. Oh, hush now. Can't you let me compliment you in peace? It's no wonder why your husband is always coming to me. You're such a bore. Might I ask what brings you here today? Well, if you must know, I'm here to do some work with my son. Nothing of your concern. If it has anything to do with the household funds that I constantly see depleting, then it is my concern. How dare you accuse me of doing something like that? Stealing? How dare you? Jake will have your head on a platter if I tell him what you just insinuated. I didn't insinuate anything. Perhaps it's your guilty conscience seeping through? Mirabelle stormed off, as mad as can be. I suspected that she was going to complain to her son, but at that point, I didn't care. I had gotten so emotionally detached and distant from this entire situation that I didn't care about the various threats that were constantly hurtled my way. I just did my best to avoid them at all times. That was until I received something suspicious in my email. It read, "Hey Mom, please remember to get the correct details for Code Harper. We can't let this plan fail. You've put too much effort and care into ensuring that everything works out smoothly for us. I can't wait for everything to go down. We're gonna be rich. Love you loads, Jake. I was confused. We're gonna be rich? Code Harper? What did all this mean? And why was I part of this plan without actually being informed about anything? After much thought and deliberation, I thought that I should respond to the email. Hey Jake, it appears as though I've been attached to this thread. Please kindly explain to me what is going on. Much love, Harper. After sending the email, Jake decided to call me. I was so shocked by the angry tone in his voice. Hell, ignore what you just saw. It has nothing to do with you. Well, clearly something is going on if you're using my name in your business meetings with your mother. Harper is a common name. Grow up and mind your own business before I do something I regret. What are you going to do, Jake? Huh? Tell me, what are you planning on doing that you're going to regret later? You know, Harper, I don't get angry much, but this time you've done it. I'll see you when I get home. He hung up the phone and I began to get scared. What were these two planning? And why was he being so angry and secretive about everything? Due to his threats, I felt extremely unsafe in the household, so I packed some bags and decided to stay in a hotel for the time being. I couldn't afford to keep spiking my anxiety up because I was constantly in contact with two devils. Once I arrived in the hotel room, I decided to call my friend Ben. Ben and I had been childhood friends, and I knew that he would help me during this stressful and troubling time. Ben arrived soon after I called him. Hey, I'm so sorry once again for what happened. Yeah, well, I guess it's just part of the marriage package. Let me show you what the email said. Maybe you can help me out. Okay, sure. I showed Ben the email, and he shared the same look of confusion that I had when first reading it. Ben pondered some more and more, and finally he said, "We need to get inside their heads and figure out what they're doing. I don't know, but something about this seems fishy. We got to find out what they're hiding. And since they don't want to be forthcoming with you, we have to look for other means of acquiring information." Like what? Like checking the account funds and balances. Have you noticed anything recently? Yes. The household funds from the joint bank accounts are steadily decreasing. I ask about it, but you know how Jake and Mirabelle are. Okay, then let's start there. It should be noted that Ben is extremely tech savvy. He's the type of person who can hack into databases if he really wanted to, and his skills were shining during our sleuthing. Once I opened up the bank accounts and bank books for Ben to see, he began his work, searching and scouring for any discrepancies, and after several hours of us deliberating and wondering what was going on, we reached a breakthrough. But it was definitely something that we weren't prepared for. It turns out that my lovely husband and mother-in-law were participating in some shady deals to incur more money. This was a hypothesis, but all of our doubts were confirmed when Ben managed to log into my husband's email account and see all of the evidence there for ourselves. Lengthy email chains between Jake and Mirabelle. They were embezzling funds from my husband's company. And that's not all. The gag is that they were going to incriminate me and make it seem like I was the one doing all of this. That's what Code Harper is. It's when they plan to unleash their gruesome attack and make you take the fall for everything. Yes, exactly. Jake would transfer the embezzled funds into the joint bank account and then use that money to make it seem like I was the one doing it. This is honestly a new level of sickness. Why would anyone do something like that? I honestly don't know. I began to break down and sob, but Ben promptly stopped me. No, Harper, this isn't the time to cry. Your life is about to be ruined if we don't do something to stop them. Thank God we now know this information, but now we got to do something about it before it's too late. You're right, but what? What can I do to stop this? I don't know. Let's think. It would be easy to go to the police with all of this information, but honestly, I needed more to satiate the bubbling rage that was in my core. I had to get back at these clowns and I had to hit them where it hurt. And that's when I got the idea. Okay, I think I got something. Okay, let's hear it. So, we know that these two love money, right? I mean, that's why they're doing all this stuff, right? So, get more money. What if I came to Jake with a business proposal that he couldn't refuse? And what if you disguise yourself as the ringleader of this fake, shady business so that we can catch them red-handed? That's a brilliant idea. Let's put that to work. After ironing out the details and realizing that time is of the essence, I called Jake to put the plan into action. Where are you? You decided to run away from the consequences? Come back home at once. I didn't run from anything. Actually, I left home because I had to tend to a very important business meeting, a business that you'd be interested in. What kind of business? Oh, it's a special kind, one that you might like. I briefly told him some details of this fake business, doing my best not to disclose everything, but making it sound interesting enough so that his ears would perk up. Ben had informed me of the type of lingo that needed to be used to ensure that Jake suspects that the business is shady, and since we've learned that he's into the shady business, he would most likely accept this business deal. Sounds interesting. So you're saying that all I have to do is invest some funds and then the returns would be at a higher rate? Yes, Jake, it's that simple. How much is needed? We have to invest a total of $30,000, but we can do it in installments if you'd like. I'll get back to you. In the background of the call, I heard him talking to Mirabelle about everything, letting her know what I said and debating on whether or not they should do the deal. Mirabelle sounded excited from the little that I heard, and it was confirmed because what Jake said next was shocking. Okay, so we're going to do this, and I'm going to send the full $30,000 so that we can do this quickly. When it comes to these details, time is of the essence. We don't have time to dilly-dally. Okay, which account will you use? I'll send it to the joint bank account, of course. Okay, sure thing. We ended the call, and later on in the evening, Ben and I received an email on Jake's account, and it read, "Just sent the $30,000 to the joint bank account. It's like she's putting her nail in her coffin. This is going to be way too easy. She'll go down for our crimes, and we run with the money." Seeing those messages hurt me a lot. After everything, this man wanted to scam me like this. The good thing is, Ben was recording everything, even the phone call that we had with Jake, so that we could build a solid case against them. I'm so sorry for everything, Harper. This man doesn't deserve you. I hope you find someone better. Me too. The next morning, Ben returned to my hotel room so that we could continue investigating and building our case against Jake and Mirabelle. Not only did I want them to go down for their crimes, I felt like I needed to be compensated for the time that was wasted in our horrendous marriage. I was going to take everything from this man. So I also collated as much evidence and information regarding emotional and mental abuse that I've endured for these years. I was going to make sure that he lives a miserable life alongside his mother. Ben was helping me out so much, and I was so appreciative of everything that he was doing for me. He did make me happy, and sometimes I wondered why I didn't marry him instead. Why are you staring at me like that? No reason. Sorry. No, it's quite all right. Let's get back to work, though. We continued working, and we were finding breakthrough after breakthrough, cementing the plan on how Jake and Mirabelle were going to get caught. I wanted the whole ordeal to be public and messy. I wanted to ruin these people's lives the same way they wanted to ruin mine. It was insane to think that such a thing could happen. A week went by, and Jake was wondering why I hadn't come home yet. But I was reducing as much contact with him as possible because I knew very soon that he would be behind bars for a very long time. At last, I contacted Jake to initiate the plan that Ben and I had been working on for the past week. and things were falling into place. I invited Mirabelle and Jake to a pretty crowded cafe, and once they arrived, the plan was set in motion, and I hit record on my voice recorder that was concealed. So glad that you two came. Just cut to the chase. We all shouldn't be out here so publicly. Why did you suggest this busy cafe anyways? I'm getting nervous. Hush, Jake. I quite like this cafe, and besides, it's like we'll hide in plain sight. Fine. It's about time you called us and informed us about the business deal we talked about. What took you so long, and why haven't you been home? Yeah, I've been busy ironing out the details of this deal, honey. Wouldn't you want everything to be precise and meticulous? Trust me. Fine, whatever. But when is our money going to come back to us? Soon, don't worry. But first, I would like to know something. Where did you get all that money? What? What are you saying? The $30,000 that you sent into the account. Where did you get that? Does it matter where I got it? Aren't you also going to use the money as well? Answer my question, Jake. Why are you interrogating him so much? This is why we don't involve you in our plans, because you have a big fat mouth. You think I don't know the truth? Do you think I don't know just how disgusting and slimy you two are? I know everything. I know that you are embezzling funds from your company. How dare you accuse me of doing such a thing? I would never, and even if I did, you don't have any proof. I decided to make a calculated decision, and I said, You're right. I don't have proof, so why don't you just tell me the truth so that we can fix this? Huh. You see, you don't have proof. Mom, I think we deserve to laugh a little, don't you think? Let me tell her everything. Jake went into full detail about how he started embezzling from his company. He also had no issue exposing that he was going to let me take the fall for it, all the while laughing with his mother looking like two evil villains. After they had a good laugh, I tried to compose myself to not cause a scene. I calmly said, Gotcha. What? I said, Gotcha. I just got you two confessing everything that you were planning on doing. Oh, please, what are you, a detective now? Don't make me laugh. I might not be a detective, but I am smart enough to record things. I then revealed my concealed recorder. I got everything you said here, which was practically a full confession. Honestly, why did you go into so much detail? Mirabelle's face turned pale and she shouted, Jake, do something! Jake dived across the table to attempt to snatch it from me, but he was too late. He started to cause a scene, and the photographers that I had hired to capture these moments leapt into action, recording everything. Some young kids also took out their phones and began to stream the event, and let me tell you, it was truly something to behold. Jake was being held back by Ben, who emerged with the photographers, and it was not looking good for the two criminals, honestly. Jake looked like a raging and abusive maniac, since he looked like he wanted to kill me, and Mirabelle was harassing the onlookers and passers-by, spitting profanities at them and me. It didn't take long for this debacle to go viral, and after that, I collected as much video evidence, the audio recording I took during the meeting, as well as all of the email chains and bank account details that Ben and I combed through, and I headed to the police station to make my case. It didn't take long for the case to be examined, since Ben and I had practically done all the work for them, and not long afterward, Jake, who had promptly been publicly fired and humiliated after making a fool of himself on social media, as well as Mirabelle, who lost her positions as a budding socialite, stood trial for their crimes for embezzling money. The case was broadcasted nationally, and Jake and Mirabelle were considered social pariahs at this point. Their faces were plastered on TV screens and newspapers for weeks, and subsequently Ben and I were accoladed for our efforts and hard work. I think I divorced Jake while his trial was going on, and it was not a good look for him, which made it quite easy for me to get a hefty settlement. With that money, in addition to selling the home that Jake and I had lived in for so long, I couldn't stand being there anymore. I was becoming a financially free and independent woman. I would attend the trials for both Jake and Mirabelle to remind them that I was one step ahead of them and that they weren't as smart as they thought they were. They would often catch my eye in the courtroom and send me nasty glares. There were even moments when the prosecutors would call me to the stand to testify, since I was the one who essentially cracked the case. Whenever I would go on the stand, I would tell the prosecutor as many details as I could remember, all the while smiling and antagonizing my awful ex-husband and mother-in-law. If looks could kill, I would be on the floor. But luckily, looks don't kill. And with the amount of criminal activity that was going on between the two, they are going to be in prison for a very, very long time. So I needn't worry about them getting back at me, as I will be living lavishly, writing a book about my experiences and how Ben and I caught these weasels, whilst they would be rotting in prison for the rest of their lives. Revenge is so sweet. Hello, my name's Olivia. I'm 40 years old and I have a wild and crazy story to tell. This is all to do with my scumbag of an ex. Even though we're still legally married, I consider him my ex-husband because of what he did to me and our daughter 4 years ago. 4 years ago, when Kimberly was just 14, we were struggling to put food on the table due to my husband aimlessly squandering all our money. It was something that brought a lot of tension in the house, as we, as a family, couldn't survive on just one salary alone. It was a point of contention between us, but he would never disclose where or what he'd spend the money on. Even though Kimberly was young, she understood that things weren't right in the household, and she even began to resent her father for the amounts that he would spend. As much as I tried to protect her innocence and keep this awful news from her, she realized at some point, with the way that Ben was acting and treating both me and her, that he was the one in the wrong. Her suspicions were confirmed when one day, on a cold and rainy afternoon on June 16th, he left. He would normally leave us alone, sometimes for months on end, but this time it was permanent. We knew that he wouldn't come back for sure once a full year had passed ever since he left. And at that moment, Kimberly and I despised that man. I hate him, Mom. I know, sweetie, I too hate him for what he's done to us and for what he's done to you. You don't deserve the way that he's treated you, and even though he needs to atone for his sins, I'm going to pick up where he's slacked off. I promise you I'm going to work so hard that you won't ever need anything. And that I did. I quit my job and began to pursue affiliate marketing as well as content writing. It took about a year to make a living that I could say I was proud of, as I managed to become a homeowner as well as buy a beautiful and luxurious car for both myself and Kimberly. We were doing very well, if I do say so myself, and I'm glad that my work ethic rubbed off on Kim, because she too began to pursue a career in online content creation. She managed to amass a total following of 90,000 followers on Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube. My baby girl was becoming a rising star. And in this day and age, turning your lifestyle into your income is a sweet deal. I am so proud of her. Unfortunately, though, as with most things in our lives, what goes up must eventually come down. And we sadly lost Henry, who was my ex-father-in-law, as well as Kimberly's grandpa. We were all devastated. Even though Ben left us all those years ago, we still kept in touch with his parents, after all. They were good people. They even helped us out during the tough financial times as well as the emotionally challenging times. They too were angry and hurt at Ben's actions, but Henry, his father, was particularly devastated. While the rest of us gave up and lost hope in Ben, Henry was still holding on to some faith that Ben would one day return with an explanation that would change our minds about what he did to us. As ridiculous as that sounds, He was such a loving person that his big heart simply couldn't accept anything other than that. Sadly, though, Henry would never get to see if his hope would ever be fruitful, as he, unfortunately, passed away. He had lived a long and fulfilling life, but I'm sure never hearing from his son is what also aided in his demise. Kimberly and I obviously attended the funeral, and once we saw Aria, Kimberly's grandma, and my ex, mother-in-law, we all ran towards each other and just held each other as tightly as we could. It was such a sad event to behold, but something completely outrageous happened that was just too shocking to comprehend. I'm sure the ambience of the cemetery, paired with paled and harrowed faces, was playing mind tricks on me, because I could have sworn that I'd just seen a ghost. My eyes must have been playing a trick on me, because somewhere in the distance I saw a ghost. I saw the ghost of a man who had been dead to me for 4 years. I saw my husband. Fortunately, or unfortunately, till this day I can't decide. Enough. It wasn't actually an apparition. It was indeed my husband, but he did look like a ghost. He was unnaturally slim, and it looked like all the blood in his body was siphoned. I attributed it to the fact that he appeared to know that his father was dead, and such harrowing news would make anybody look and feel ill. He approached the funeral, and everybody was, unsurprisingly, shocked. Kimberly began to scream and shout at her father, berating him for leaving all those years ago. Aria, his mother, began to sob even harder, wondering where everything went wrong. But I, on the other hand, was frozen still. I couldn't move. I was just so overwhelmed with a flood of emotions. Look, it's clear that your presence isn't wanted here. You don't get to just randomly show up anyhow. I think it's best that you leave, the same way that you left so easily 4 years ago. I hate you, and I don't want to see you here. Oh my goodness, Ben. How could you have left all those years ago? Your father died of a broken heart, you know. Let him stay. Everyone looked shocked, including Ben. Honestly, I even surprised myself after being stunned for what felt like years. I realized at that moment that this was not the time nor the place to have such a dramatic display of pent-up emotions. Even though I hated his guts and wasn't expecting to see his face here, he did lose his father, and he had the right to see him one last time. I expressed this sentiment to the parties involved, and everyone agreed, for the time being at least, to remain civil and cordial, out of respect for dear Henry, who was no longer with us. The funeral went on, and we all reconvened at my home. Ben also came and said, "Nice place you got here." "Cut the crap, Ben. You don't just waltz in here like nothing happened. If you want to stay here any longer, you have to tell us everything, absolutely everything, because I will not have you taint this beautiful home with your negative energy. Olivia has worked way too hard for this home. You owe us an explanation, and you can start with why you look like a zombie. Actually, scratch that. You can start by stating your business. What exactly do you want? Because we all know that you're not here because of Grandpa's funeral." "Of course I'm here because of my father's funeral. He was my father, but I'm also here for another thing. I'm here to collect my inheritance." I had to physically hold Kim back before she attempted to launch another vicious attack. Some heads were being turned, and I could hear people murmuring about the brewing altercation that was about to ensue. Luckily, Aria had a hold of the crowd while I escorted Ben and Kim to a more secluded section of the house. "I didn't mean to hurt you, my baby." "Don't call me that. I'm not your anything. You forfeited the right to call me that the moment you decided to leave us to fend for ourselves with no explanation or anything. I mean, what sort of father does that? I try to forgive you, but I simply can't." "Look, Kim, Olivia, I'm sorry about everything. I really am, but I desperately need the money. I'm in some hot water right now, and You think we care about you and your problems? By the looks of it, you seem to have gotten yourself in the wrong crowd. Are you doing drugs? Ben hesitated, and at that moment it made sense as to why he was so pale and sickly looking. Ben? At that moment, Aria joined us. Now that I've sorted everything out, Ben, can you please explain what happened? You know, your father waited for you all this time. He was the one who held on to the hope that you would return one day, with a good enough explanation that would solve all of our doubts. So please tell me that you come bearing some good news. Tell me something to believe in you again. I came here to get my inheritance money, Mom. He's on drugs, Grandma. That's why he came here, to get his inheritance money so that he can buy more drugs. No, it's not like that at all. Look, you were right about me hanging with the wrong crowd. Let's just say that I was at the wrong place at the wrong time, and well, now I owe some people some money. How much are we talking about? 50. 50,000? Ben, what did you do? Wow, that is great. So you mean to tell me while Mom and I were struggling to keep warm and feed ourselves, you were messing around with shady people? Ha! Well, we won't help you with that. You made your bed, and now you have to lay in it. Sweetie, I know you're upset, but please let's just... Are you trying to defend him right now? He left us, Mom. I know, Kimberly. He didn't just leave you, okay? He left me too. He left your grandmother as well, and he left Grandpa too. He broke all of our hearts. And we don't ever have to forgive him for doing that, but clearly he's learned his lesson, right? I mean, just look at him. It's so crazy how I was defending him so wholeheartedly back then, when in the end, it was because of me that he eventually did what he did. Shortly after the funeral was finalized, Ben was putting up in a motel, and Aria and I, mostly Aria, would visit him to see if he needed anything. Kim refused the idea of even seeing his face again. We just wanted to finalize his inheritance so that he could be on his merry way. Kim and I decided that we didn't want much to do with him, but Aria, seeing as she was his mother, obviously wanted to try and rekindle something. As the weeks went by and the family lawyers did their best to authenticate Henry's will and see about inheritance values, Aria brought Ben to the house so that she could at the very least promote a civil environment amongst us all. As much as the bitterness and hatred weren't going to do us any good, it was going to take a long time for us to be anywhere near that. Kim would sometimes come just to sit and not speak, but she mostly opted out of the whole thing. Finally, the lawyers informed us of the inheritances that each person would receive, and by some lucky stroke of fate, it turned out that the inheritance money that Ben would receive was going to amount to $50,000. Kim was infuriated. She didn't find it fair that the person who robbed her of her happiness for many, many years gets to be rewarded out of the blue. As much as she was an adult, she was still my baby, and I could understand her frustrations. But unfortunately, it wasn't up to her to decide whether he would get the money or not. Aria and I were seemingly nonchalant about the findings, and honestly, I just wanted this whole process to be done with so that I could go back to living my good life. As Ben was assimilating to this lifestyle, it appeared as though his demeanor changed. He went from shy, timid, and remorseful to slightly arrogant and cocky, especially when he heard that he would be receiving exactly what he came here for. I noted this behavior change, but opted not to say anything and just chalk it up to the drugs he was doing. It was so sad to see a man who used to be so respectable end up like this. I just couldn't understand. A few more weeks went by and Aria told me, Ben's inheritance money is ready to be collected. He doesn't know about it yet, but I wanted to inform you beforehand. I know it's a terrible thing to give such a large amount of money to an addict. As he can do, God, I don't even want to think about what he'd want to do. I'm so sorry, my child, but I just don't think that I can handle giving him the money just to see him disappear again. It would just shatter that sliver of hope that I have left for him. I can't be the one to give it to him. Please, can you do it? Of course, Aria. I can't imagine how hard this has been on you. It takes a different type of strength as a mother to witness such an awful thing happen to your baby. You've been strong for too long, Ma. It's time for you to rest. Please don't worry. I'll handle everything. Although I took on the task of handing Ben the money, I too needed some time to regulate myself and be at peace with any outcome that was about to happen. To calm myself down, ironically enough, I hid away in the attic where all of the old paraphernalia of my old life would sit. I kept a lot of the things from the old house. As I managed to make peace with my situation, I discovered that these old things that used to be filled with pain also remind me of just how far I'd come. It seemed like the perfect spot for me to just sit and reflect upon the old and dusty plastic tea set that we managed to bargain for at a cheap yard sale when we couldn't afford proper dishes and cutlery. I reminisced on the half-dead heater that had a mind of its own and decided when it wanted to work. Oftentimes it would choose not to, and Kim and I would have to huddle together for warmth, but it was never enough. I looked at Ben's old chest full of what I presumed to be old work documents. I never dared to open it though, as I was scared of just how much money was being taken from the household to fund his other seemingly more important lifestyle. For whatever reason though, on this day, the day I was supposed to give him the money, I decided that I couldn't be afraid anymore. I had to see what was inside. I broke open the now worn-out chest to find papers and papers of bank statements and checkbooks, all detailing the amount of money that Ben had wasted away. With the bank statements detailing where the money was going, I noted that the account recipient was named Maria. I didn't know of a Maria, but as I began to dig deeper, I found out who exactly this Maria was, and it made my heart drop. Deep within the chest was a letter, a handwritten letter. It read, "Dear Ben, when are we going to stop sneaking around like this? I'm getting bored and tired of your inability to kick your wife and kid to the curb like you said you would. You seem to enjoy spending months with me, taking all of my drugs, and going back to your family, even though you clearly hate them. If you don't tell them the truth, I will get Manuel involved. You already owe him tons of money from all the drugs you do with him for free. And this is how you want to treat me? I'm giving you 24 hours to get this done. Otherwise, you'll be in big trouble. Maybe I'll tell your wife all about me and our affair, as well as all the expensive bags and shoes you buy me. Or maybe I'll tell Manuel to get his goons to sort you out. Maybe I'll do both. Who knows? All of this can be avoided if you just do what we agreed upon. Remember, 24 hours or your entire life is going to come crashing down. Tick, tick, babe. Ciao, Maria." Reading this letter almost made my heart explode in my chest. I even had to sit down. So Ben was having an affair before he left, and he had spent the money on his mistress. The thought made me want to vomit. This man had prioritized his party animal lifestyle while his wife and kid were at home starving. Completely unforgivable and completely disgusting. This is what you were waiting for. The explanation for all of his horrendous behavior simply boils down to selfish self-indulgence. The rage and bitterness that I had for so long began to boil within me. At this point, I was moving on autopilot. I got up, gathered everything from the chest, and stormed to the dingy motel that Ben was living in. I burst through the door to find Ben with some drugs on the bed. "You are completely unbelievable. You're doing drugs just as I was about to give you the money?" "What? You have the money? That's great. Give it to me." "You are pathetic and you make me sick." "Yeah, well, I don't care. Give me the money, Olivia." "What is this?" I flung the papers to him, holding on to the letter I had the pleasure of discovering just moments ago. Whilst he was sifting through the bank statements he conveniently hid from me, I began to read the letter out loud. He froze. If he didn't look sickly and pale before, he looked emaciated now. He looked like a scared little puppy by the time I was finished reading. You got this letter on June 15th, right? The day before you just up and left. I can explain. No, Ben, you can't explain. The time for explaining is over. You're 4 years too late. I was sick, Olivia. I still am sick, as you can see. Stop with the excuses, Ben. You think I wasn't tired? You think I didn't want relief anywhere I could find it? We all make choices, Ben. You're a grown man, damn it. You left us because you were having an affair. It wasn't like that. Then what was it like? I never loved you. I never wanted that life. I never wanted to be with you. I just got with you and had the kid so that Mom and Dad could get off my back. I never wanted responsibility, and frankly, I don't care enough to rekindle or mend anything between us. Not you, not Kimberly, and not even my mother. I know it sounds awful to say, but it's the truth. Take it or leave it. Now give me my money. I can't say I'm surprised, actually. You've always been the evil villain to me. And that's all you ever were. Even now, as I look at you, you look like some demon from a comic book. You're disgusting. Olivia, I really don't care what you think about me. Just give me my money. You might not care what I think. You might not even care about what your mother and daughter think as well. But it appears as though a certain Maria and Manuel have a hold on you, even if it's just a little bit. He froze once more. Bingo. I take it that you managed to escape them, right? Now you're running with a new crew, and because you're a pathetic mess, you managed to mess up those relations also. He briefly nodded. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to leave this place immediately without the money. You won't get a single dime of this inheritance money. Consider this money reparations for Kimberly and I. You owe us that much at least. What? Are you crazy? Tom's going to kill me if I come back without his money. That's not my problem. You should have thought about that before engaging with this stuff. And what if I refuse? Well then, I believe that someone with a very large following on Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube might just accidentally leak some very private information about you. You know, the type of information that can reach anybody, including people named Manuel and Maria. Additionally, somebody else with a very successful blog and website can write an article, further exposing you to absolutely anybody with an internet connection. All right, I hear you loud and clear. Yeah, I'm giving you 24 hours to get all of your things and get out of here. Get out of this city. Hell, get out of this state. Your presence isn't welcome here. You don't need to say goodbye to anybody. I'm going to tell Aria and Kimberly everything, as if their hearts haven't been broken enough. What a shame indeed. I don't even know what to say. How about ciao, good luck. Let's hope your drug buddies don't rough you up too badly. Although, now that I think about it, I don't care what they do to you. You've already been dead to me for 4 years now. He left town the next, and thankfully none of us has seen him since. I am just very content in the fact that all three of us have some closure on where Ben had gone and why. Gary, where did you keep the gifts? I can't find them in the house. Oh, the gifts? I noticed a discomforting look on Gary's face. I affirmed. Yes, the gifts. What did you do with them? I sold them. What? Why the hell did you sell the gifts? I needed the money, so I sold them. Anyways, those gifts were of no use to you. Have you lost your mind? Those gifts were a relief to our pockets. Most of the gifts were essentials for the baby. Why are you creating such a scene out of these trivial things? Well, those gifts were gifted by my parents, so I can do anything with them. They are mine. Hello, my name is Molly. I'm a 34-year-old nurse married to Gary, who is a businessman. Gary has fishery farms where the fish is harvested and later exported to different places. Gary was a fun-loving, energetic man who was always so full of life. After my hectic hospital shift, I looked forward to spending my leisure time with Gary. Our life was moving smoothly for some time until Gary suffered a major loss in his business. The ship exporting the fish from Gary's farm overturned in a storm. Gary was a small businessman, and this loss was insufferable for him. He went into extreme depression. I tried to console him emotionally. Perhaps that was the only thing I could do to comfort him. I didn't have enough savings to help him recover from the loss. I cooked his favorite meals and took him out to his favorite pizza places and gaming parlor. I tried to comfort him as much as I could. Gary spent weeks lying on the couch and playing video games. We visited his farm for a few hours in the day and spent most of his time lounging on the couch, doing nothing. He didn't help me with the household chores either. It was difficult for me to manage the household chores after my stressful shift at the hospital. Being a nurse, I have to extend my shifts and sometimes work night shifts as well. Even on the days when I worked overtime, I cooked meals, cleaned the house, and did other household chores before calling it a day. Gary wouldn't bother to even clean his plates. To be honest, I was annoyed at this sight after a while. I might sound harsh, but these challenges were a part of business, and people dealing in these businesses should be aware of all the consequences. I have very limited business knowledge, but I understand that after a breakdown, one should get faster at his work, reanalyze and re-strategize the work instead of mourning over it. Wasting time on mourning over the loss would add nothing but more trouble for the business. Although I didn't say any of these to Gary, I gave him all the time he needed to nurse his loss. After a month or so, I mustered the courage to confront Gary on this matter. Hey Gary, I know you're feeling too low after that damage, but don't you think you should be moving on now? I mean, instead of mourning, shouldn't you focus on fixing things? Perhaps if you continue to have low spirits, things might get even worse for you. You're so insensitive and selfish. Molly, instead of being supportive of my situation, you are lecturing me about the business rules. Gary's reaction was very much expected, and I didn't mind those words. I knew he was feeling low, yet I wanted to put my thoughts to him. Honey, I know I might sound rude at this point, but I think you're damaging your business further by wasting this time, mourning over the last deal. Having said that, it's your business. I only wish good things for you. You know I love you. Gary was disgruntled by my words, but he preferred to plug in his earphones and concentrate on his video games. It took him more than a month to get back to his business schedule as usual. I felt relieved that finally things are getting normal. However, I noticed a gradual change in Gary's schedule. He had no routine for coming home. Sometimes he came after midnight and sometimes in the morning, and on some days he didn't come home at all. Whenever I inquired him about his odd routine, he would brush me off with his snarky response. Businessmen don't have shifts, you know. We are the owners of our time and work. His snarky response made me wonder about the reason for his growing arrogance. After a few months, Gary again suffered a loss, but this time he did not lounge on the sofa and mourn. Instead, he got moody and rough. The change was visible. He was no longer a happy-going person. He was more stressed, and for some reason, he was always in a hurry. God knows what he was up to. One day, Gary came up to me and asked me very politely, "Honey, I need some money to scale my business. I'm really in stress these days. Do you have any savings to spare?" I was shocked at this sudden ask. "Well, you know, I've been running this house for the past many months after your business suffered that loss. Besides, I have lived my life on the edge, so I don't have enough savings. Yes, that's right. I was the kind of person who believed in enjoying my life to the fullest, at least in my 20s, so I spent most of my savings for traveling and exploring new places. My answer didn't go too well on Gary. He made a disgusted face. After a while, I too felt guilty for not helping him. I was saving as much as I could for a trip to Florida. I thought to myself, can't I sacrifice one trip for my husband? And the answer was yes, I can. Or rather, I should. As a married couple, we should help and support each other. So I decided to give the money which I was saving for my next trip to Florida. I was hopeful that he would pace up his business and things would be fine again. Unfortunately, that never happened. It was during this time I got pregnant. That was the happiest moment of my life. Gary was happy too, but he looked concerned. I was confused at his mixed emotions. Gary, ain't you happy with the news? What's bothering you? I'm happy for the baby too, but what? I'm a little worried if I'll be able to give a decent life to the baby with my unstable income. Isn't the baby happening too early? The baby is happening just at the right time. I want the baby and I'll keep it. Gary was annoyed at my response. He wasn't ready to take up the responsibilities of the baby. I brushed it off with the thought that Gary was just too overwhelmed. Men usually feel overwhelmed by the news of the first pregnancy, and especially if it is not planned, because the baby adds to the responsibility. Honestly, I was also concerned about Gary's unstable income. It's extremely difficult to run a house and provide a good life for a child with just one income. We cannot just depend on my income alone, but I was also sure that once Gary becomes a father, he would understand his responsibilities and everything would be fine. I thought Gary would get serious with his work now, but instead, Gary was becoming reckless day by day. Borrowing money became a habit for him. He always had an urgent and exclusive reason for borrowing money. Sometimes it was on the pretext of paying his staff, and sometimes it was to invest in a new breed of fish. I was getting annoyed by him, but I didn't want to take extreme steps at this point with the baby inside me. I chose to ignore Gary as much as I could and just focus on taking care of myself and my baby. I was still okay to endure his last-minute requests for money until he was polite about the request, as I genuinely wanted to help him and bring him out of the situation. But over time, this request became an order. Earlier, his sentences were, "Honey, I'm so sorry to ask you for a favor again. I need $500 for X, Y, or Z reasons." But now, his sentences are, "Molly, send me $500 ASAP." I tried various means to know the reason for his increasing need for money, but every time I got one answer. "I'm in debt. I took some small loans to pay for my business, and now the interest is soaring. Hence, I need the money to repay the loan amount and the interest." Whenever I refused to pay, he would mess around like a 5-year-old, slamming the door, rattling the cutlery, and making a disgusted and wretched face until I gave him what he wanted. Gary's attitude was getting on my nerves. During the 7th month of my pregnancy, my parents-in-law arranged a baby shower party for me. I felt so grateful to them for doing this. I thanked my parents-in-law wholeheartedly. I was showered with thoughtful gifts from my parents-in-law, their friends and relatives. The function came as a relief to me after many months of stress and despair. I spent a good time with everyone. Besides, I was overjoyed with the gifts. The guests were thoughtful to gift us with all the essentials which the baby would need in the initial few months. We were running tight on budget, and procuring all these items would have been very heavy on our pockets. The next morning when I woke up, I saw the living room was empty and the gifts were gone. I thought Gary would have kept it in the storeroom. I went to the storeroom to check, but there was no sign of any gift. Gary was not at home. I called him, but he didn't answer my call. When he came back, I asked him, "Gary, where did you keep the gifts? I couldn't find them in the house." "Oh, the gifts, I noticed a discomforted look on Gary's face. "Yes, the gifts. What did you do with them?" "I sold them." "What? Why the hell did you sell the gifts?" "I needed the money, so I sold them. Anyways, those gifts were of no use to you." "Have you lost your mind? Those gifts were a relief to our pockets. The gifts were essential items for the baby: clothes, the crib, blankets, strollers, and other toiletries." I was so disappointed on hearing this that I started sobbing. "You know I was relieved to have those gifts. It saved so much money we would have had to spend on buying them. We already have such a tight budget. How could we buy those things again?" "Why are you creating such a scene out of these trivial things?" "Well, those gifts were given by my parents, so I can do anything with them. They are mine." "Excuse me? Those gifts were for the baby. It was not for you to sell it for and fill up your pockets." Fine. Don't give me a moral lecture. I'll get all that stuff when the baby comes out." "How will you get that? Do you have the money?" Gary lowered his gaze, and I knew at once that he didn't have the money. I rolled my eyes and said, "Give me the money you got after selling the gifts." I don't have that." I asked him with a strict voice. "What did you do with the money?" "I used the money in my business." "What the hell, Gary?" He immediately snapped at me. "Oh, please, don't start your preachings again. I'm done with you. You're a sad woman who needs an opportunity to cry over every minor inconvenience." I was infuriated at his words. Gary crossed all his limits and I couldn't control my rage. "What the hell are you up to? You don't contribute any money to the household expenses. You barely do any household chores. You're surviving on my income. On top of that, you dare to say such words to me? Instead of helping me, you are adding to my problems." "If you have so many problems with me, why don't you leave me? At least I will be able to live peacefully in my house. I feel suffocated to be around you. You disgust me." I had no energy left to argue with Gary. He was getting unreasonable. I bit my tongue and went into my room, slamming the door behind me. I knew something was wrong with Gary. I suspected him of having an affair and that he was spending the money on his mistress. I decided to dig up the information. That night, I jinxed Gary's soup with a little sedative, which was just enough to put him into a deep slumber. After I ensured that Gary was in deep slumber, I unlocked his phone using his fingerprints. He was in deep sleep to be woken up by this. I scavenged his phone, carefully going through all the emails and chat messages. After an hour of investigation, I found the missing piece of the puzzle which solved the mystery. I was anticipating messages and photos of Gary's mistress, but what I found was far more troublesome than an affair. Gary got into illegal drug activity. Yes, I was shocked too. All this started after he incurred the first loss. To make up for the loss, he took up the illegal task of exporting the drugs through his fish. People who are into fishing businesses know that illegal drugs are transported from one place to another in fish and meats through the cargo. I was unaware of this business. Drugs? Seriously? The email revealed that Gary was reluctant to get into this activity at first, but he was tempted into this for some quick bucks. The dealers lured him as a fix to his loss-making business. Gary started it as a one-time activity and a quick fix to recover his business from the loss. Needless to say, quick money is more addictive than drugs. Eventually, he got more and more involved in this. He started enjoying the illegal business and easy money. This was the reason for his sudden arrogance. Illegal business is a slippery slope, and Gary too slipped towards his downfall. It took him down in no time. The second loss which Gary suffered was bigger and more horrendous. The second time, when the ship overturned, not only the fish but the drugs too were engulfed by the ocean waves. The drug dealers were torturing Gary to pay for the losses, as it was Gary's responsibility to transport it safely. I figured out all this information from the conversation Gary had with the dealer. I could no longer stay with a criminal. Besides, I'm a nurse and I've witnessed the suffering of people because of drug abuse. It is morally and ethically wrong. I collected all the evidence which was required to prove my case, cleaned all the history of tampering, and kept his phone back. I couldn't sleep for the rest of the night. The next morning, while Gary was still asleep, I packed my bags and left the house. I went to my colleague's house and narrated everything. She was my trustworthy friend. I was too scared to lodge a police complaint by myself. I was worried that the evidence I collected from Gary's phone would take down a lot of people along with him. So if he or any of his acquaintances get to know that it was me who has exposed them, then I might get into serious trouble. My colleague had a cousin who was a lawyer. She called him up and he was there at her house in no time. The lawyer suggested that I can provide all these details to the police anonymously. The police would conduct an independent investigation, and if my evidence turned out to be true, the police would register the case on their own and arrest the suspect. I would come out clean. I followed the lawyer's suggestion. He had contacts in the police department, and I gave all the evidence to the police as an anonymous person. On the other hand, when Gary woke up in the morning, he saw that I had left the house with some of my belongings. He thought that I was angry with him because of the gifts. He texted me, "I know you, bitch. You're flaring up because of those stupid gifts. You'd be hoping that I'll fall on my knees to apologize to you and beg you to return home. I'm not going to do any of it." I saw his message and I ignored it. I was happy that they had assumed this. It would give me the time to execute my plan without Gary getting suspicious of my absence. I was a 7-month pregnant woman going through this turmoil and plethora of emotions. I was terrified with the thought if Gary finds out that it was me, he might try to harm me or my baby. I was in extreme adversity. As we planned, the police took a week to investigate the matter. The evidence had the contacts and conversations that Gary was having with the dealers. My colleague suggested I stay with her until everything is sorted. After a week, I got a call from the lawyer that the police investigation had confirmed that my evidence was true, and Gary, along with a few others, would be pressed with criminal charges. I didn't know whether to be happy about this news or if I should be sad that Gary would be behind bars. I was still anxious. After a few hours, I got a call from a number. When I answered it, Gary was on the other end. I was trembling with fear, wondering if he already knows the truth. Gary spoke to me in a fearful tone. "Babe, I need your help. The police have arrested me. They have pressed charges of some drug-dealing activity. I'm innocent. I know you were still angry with me for that gift thing, but please help me now. Get me bail and a lawyer. We can sort out our differences when I'm out of here." I sighed with relief that he didn't know the truth. "Gary, I don't want to be associated with any criminal. Forget about the bail. I'm going to break all ties with you. I'm filing for divorce." I hung up the phone without giving him the chance to speak. This was my plan. The lawyer had suggested that once Gary is arrested, I can file for divorce on the grounds of disassociation from a criminal. Neither Gary nor any of his acquaintances would suspect my move, and I could be safe. The news of Gary's arrest reached his parents. After I denied the help, Gary called up his parents and they too refused to help him, stating that it would damage their reputation if they support a criminal. This made my plan easier. I filed for the divorce and it was settled smoothly. A year has passed since that incident. I gave birth to a gorgeous baby girl. When I look back to those times, I pat myself for following my instinct and sleuthing on Gary. Had I not done that, Gary would have still sucked all my money like a parasite, or God knows, he might have harmed me or my baby. Criminals have no morals. The fact that it was me who has given all the evidence to the police remained a secret between me, my colleague, and the lawyer. I'm living with my parents for the time being, until the baby grows up. Gary's parents are helping me with the child support until he's out, which I doubt to be any time soon. Quick money could be an easy way out, but more often than not, it leads to a slippery slope of adversity and crime.